Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'll be your host. My name is Sean Jakes, but it's not about me. I want to quickly move us on to the topic of the day, which is building quality Salesforce apps where automated testing meets business engineering. And so we've got a great topic today, talking about how you are improving your Salesforce development processes, and as well as making sure that you're testing them to release them with high quality. I have two speakers today. They're Pablo Gonzalez, who is a business engineering architect from Salto, and Orly Schechtman, who is a senior product manager at Testim. And I'm at Testim as well. Let me just quickly highlight that we're going to make this as interactive as possible. So please, enter a question in the chat or in the Q&A at any time. If that question is appropriate to that particular topic that they're covering, then we'll interrupt and ask that question. Or if it's something that can be handled offline, then we might just address it that way, or we might save it till the end. So please ask questions. That makes it it makes it better for everyone. The other thing I want to say is that both Salto and Testim have free accounts that you can get started with. So if you're the kind of person that likes to get going and try it, you see what you like, or you like what you see here, and you're ready to get started, you can go out to testim.io or salto.io. You can get a free account or try to get started, and you can start using this product right away. And both of them have free tiers that allow you to really feel the product. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Pablo. And Pablo is going to take us through the first part of the presentation, and then Orly will continue on. So with that, Pablo, take it away.
Okay, can you see my screen?
You're good.
All right, my name is Pablo. I'm a business engineer and architect at Salto. I've been a Salesforce developer for the past 11 years, and I'm excited to be here to talk to you about business engineering. So before we look at these two technologies, business engineering and automated testing, we need to go back a little bit and review the Salesforce development lifecycle. So typically we have five phases for the Salesforce development lifecycle, those being plan, develop, deploy, test, and support. So on the planning phase, it's all about understanding the requirement, right? What is the scope of that change? What metadata needs to be changed? And occasionally as well, what is the impact of making that change in the org? Once you do that planning, then you move on to the development phase. And that's where you typically create some validation rules, write some Apex triggers, or whatever it is you're doing. Then you move on to the deployment phase, where you deploy these changes to the next environment, which could be an integration environment or a UAT environment, and eventually production. After that, we move into testing, where we have different kinds of testing frameworks like automated testing, user acceptance testing, and regression testing. And then finally, we have support, which is basically just ensuring that whatever changes we made are resistant to further changes in the org. So what we're going to see here is that Salto and our approach to business engineering can help us with the first three phases of this process: plan, develop, and deploy. And then testing and automated testing can help with the last two, testing and support. All right, so before we can explain this, let's review a use case. So let's say that a Salesforce organization has a field on the account object called isGDPR safe. And this field is used in many different business processes. It's in Apex, flows, validation rules, etc. And then at some point in time, they decided they want to move away from this concept of GDPR safe, and instead they want to rename it to is audit ready. So the initial scope of the change is just to change the field label to is audit ready. But as I said, that field and the concept as a whole is used everywhere throughout the org. So it's not just changing the field label, it's changing the entire terminology in the org, changing the entire concept. And obviously that has consequences on your metadata and configuration. So when you're thinking about a use case like this, there are different challenges. For example, how do you identify all the areas that need to change in the org? And once you identify those changes, how do you make them in bulk? Now, because you're doing so many changes, you also need a way to deploy them easily and keep track of them. And also sometimes you may need to actually roll back that change if something goes wrong. And then finally, as I said, support. You need to make sure that this change doesn't break any other business processes or rules. So what I hope that we can show you today is that, again, Salto can help you with the first three, and then testing can help with the other ones. Okay, so let's just move on here. So our approach to business engineering, or let me stop for a moment and explain what business engineering is. It's basically the practice of bringing software engineering practices to business applications. And so this could be Zendesk, NetSuite, in our case, Salesforce. And basically we do that by consuming the application's metadata and then translated that or enhancing it by creating relationships between the metadata elements. If it's Salesforce, then we translate the XML files into a type system, and we also create fully qualified names. Now, I'm aware that sounds like gibberish, so let me actually show an example of what that means. Typically, the Salesforce metadata is represented in XML. So what we see here on the left is a custom field called number of locations in its usual XML representation. What we do in Salto is we translate this into another language called NACL, which stands for not another configuration language. And as you can see, it reads a lot easier. And we also have a type system where in this case, we know this is a number field. Now, clearly, this is just an implementation detail of how we do things. That's not the value proposition. But what's really good is that once we have any application's metadata in this format, we can satisfy a number of use cases like detailed impact analysis, any text operation that you can think of. We can support that across your entire org, such as find and replace. We also have capabilities for a simple audit trail. And we also, when it comes to Salesforce, we support reference data. And reference data in this case would be data like CPQ or Financial Cloud or Field Service Lightning, where you have a lot of configuration data that really should be metadata. And so we'll see an example of how that works. Okay, so now let me get out of here and show you what Salto looks like, and we'll go through those phases of the development process. So this is Salto. So the way it works is you have different environments, and these environments represent your Salesforce org. So in this case, I have an environment called Test and Dev. Your workspaces is where you can actually make changes to those environments. So the first step here is I connected my development environment with my workspace, and then I fetch the configuration. Fetching is just downloading the entire metadata of that environment into text files. So as you can see, I can browse all my metadata here, and I can also search for it. So let's search for that field that we said that we were going to change. All right, so here's the field. And as you can see, that is the format that I showed earlier, NACL, which just reads a lot easier than XML. Now, let's go ahead and start the planning phase. So we said that we need to change this to is audit ready? And the planning phase is about understanding, okay, what happens if I do this change? What could break? So the first thing I'm going to do here is click on view references. And this is going to show me all the areas where this custom field is used. Now, this is way more powerful than the traditional impact analysis that Salesforce provides out of the box, because I can see exactly where a field is used, or I can see the exact location. So for example, if I want to see where this field is used in a flow, I can just click here and I can see the exact location where in this case, it's in a record create element. The standard Salesforce impact analysis would only tell you that the flow is using the field, but you would have no idea how it is being used. You would have to click on the flow and then go through all the elements until you find the field location. So here we can tell you that very quickly. Now, after this exercise, you basically come out of it with two outcomes. Either there's nothing to change, meaning there's no impact, even though the field is used in different areas of your metadata, there may not be a big impact. And in that case, you just make your change. Or there is a big impact, and then you're going to have to include those additional changes in the scope of your deployment. For this exercise, let's assume that there's no impact on the metadata. So I'm going to exit here. Now, we did say that the field is heavily used across the org, and it's a whole concept, it's a whole terminology that the organization has. It's not just a field. So I want to see where are we using this concept of an account being GDPR ready. So I'm just going to search for the sentence here, is GDPR ready? And then I can see here on the text results, so is GDPR safe, not ready? I can see all the locations where that is used. So I can see the account field label, which is the one that we're going to change, but I can see that it's also used in other areas. For example, it is used in the error message of a validation rule. And it appears here that it's also used in an email template. Now, one of the most interesting parts of our approach to business engineering is that we also support data, which is what I mentioned earlier about reference data. So if I look at this here, basically what I'm seeing here is that there are 2 case records in the org that also have this value in one of their fields. If I go here and click go to service, you'll see that this is actually a Salesforce case. So if you think about this, I was actually looking at Salesforce metadata, but now I'm looking at data and it looks the exact same way. So we have the ability to bring down or to fetch both data and metadata from your org in the exact same format. And that means that all the operations that we support, like find and replace, deployment, impact analysis, is available for both data and metadata. And really, it's just any data. It could be CPQ data, it could be field service lightning data. In this case, it's just case data because that's what I configured to fetch. All right, so we see all the places where this concept is being used. And now we decided, right, we want to change it. So this is when we start the next phase of that process, which is the development phase, when we actually make those changes. So I'm going to click find and replace here. And I'm just going to type in is audit ready. That's going to be the new value. And I can see here a preview of what the change would look like. So again, I can see that's going to change the account label, which is the main one, is going to change the email templates as well. And it's also going to change the case records. Okay, so I'm happy with the change. So I'm going to click replace all. And that's it. Now I can come here and click deploy. Now, what's happening here is Salto is calculating the differences between your Salto workspace and your Salesforce org. So all the changes that we just made were really only in our local version of this. And now we're checking, okay, how is this workspace different from what is actually in the Salesforce org? And that's going to create a deployment plan, which is what I have just now. So I'm just going to click deploy and then go back to it for a moment. What you see here is that Salto automatically determined what needed to be deployed. So again, the case, a pick list value, then the account field label, the case records, email templates, etc. So this is very different from traditional deployment where you have to specify, okay, I want to deploy these items. Here, you just make the changes in the Salto workspace, and then we calculate the difference for you so that you don't have to start, you don't have to spend time selecting what needs to be deployed. Obviously, in this case, I made the change directly in Salto, but you could have also made it in Salesforce, or you could have done it with Salesforce DX or anything else, and then just fetch those changes and deploy them to another environment. Okay, so the deployment is done. And now the next thing I can do is I can push this to Git or to GitHub in this case. So this is the other scenario that we cover, is that because the workspace is different from what's in your GitHub repository, again, we know what's different. So we allow you to just take everything here and commit it to Git with just a few clicks. So I'm just going to say here, changed field label, and I'm going to push this. All right, so that's done. So I can just click here, view on GitHub. And you see how easy that was. Now I can see all the history of the changes that I made, where I changed the field label and all the other areas where that term was used, from is GDPR safe to is audit ready. And so now I have a whole history of what changed in the org. Now, of course, let's imagine that maybe that change was done too early, or maybe something did break later on in your business processes, and we may need to roll back that change. And so with Salto, that's actually very easy because we can always go back to our Git log and just go back to the previous commit and click revert to commit. And that's essentially going to take our workspace to the previous state before our last commit. And then I'll be able to just revert to that change. So as you can see here, I would revert back to is GDPR safe. And again, all of this is happening in the workspace. Then I will need to sync that with the Salesforce org. So that's how Salto can really help with these three phases of the development lifecycle, right? Plan and develop and deploy. So now that you have all these tools at your disposal and you've made this change safely, then you need a way to understand, okay, there's no impact on my metadata, all my bases are covered, but what about the business processes? Did I break any business process by making this change? And that's where automated testing can help a lot. So Ori, I'll pass it over to you now.
Thanks, Pablo. Thanks. So let me share my screen so we can talk about the challenges of, can you see my screen, guys? Everything great. So going back to the process that Pablo displayed in the first slide, what does it mean to make changes, deploy the changes, and then test the changes? An essential part in the strategy of understanding is it safe to deploy, or what is the impact of the changes that were made in my environment, in my Salesforce environment, in my metadata, in any custom application, or any kind of change that was made in the platform of Salesforce. How can I understand what was the effect on my business flows, business process, or on my user experience? And for that, you need a strategy. And the strategy is like in any kind of process of deploying a code, is to test. And the strategy needs to combine the ability to cover as much business flows as you can, testing the end-to-end flows that are important and critical to your business. And for that, you need to have a tool that will allow you to author as much test as needed and to monitor the outcome of those tests that are covering your business flows. For that, you need a platform that, like testing, that enables you to author test in a low-code or no-code way, allowing you to enter or log into your environment, record your flows, capture all the flows that are important to you in your business, and then run the test in a regression way and capture the fallbacks or the error or the unexpected behavior or the expected behavior. So testing is that platform. So in order to understand what are the challenges, or how can I use such platform that captures all my business flows and can run it in a regression way so I can understand the impact on my business flow, we need to understand what does it mean to test Salesforce. So for that, I have 4 bullets or 4 questions that I want to experience and talk about together and demo. And the first bullet talks about the dynamic UI of Salesforce. What does it mean and why is it a challenge? And I'm going to show it in a demo shortly. So Salesforce basically is a very and highly flexible platform, making any customer, enabling any customer to make the Salesforce instance its own. You can add, you can change layout, you can add your business rules, you can add or update your applications, and one Salesforce for one customer doesn't look the same as the other customer Salesforce. So from the capability of the platform, any customer can really change Salesforce end to end, from the UI to the business flows. The other challenge is the Salesforce platform itself. So anyone that has an experience in automated test for UI or web interfaces knows that platforms like Salesforce that introduces a lot of dynamic classes, dynamic values, shadow DOMs, and a lot of customized objects can be a nightmare, and you need to have a stable method that can be resilient to those dynamic changes. And here I want to show you an example of how we can really have a stable test with testing. And a side note that I'm going to talk about just for a minute is even a simple action like login to Salesforce can be very, very complex. Salesforce provides or makes its users to use one-factor, two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication like everybody are now experiencing. It can introduce a lot of dialogues and acknowledgements along the way, and even a simple login can be challenging, and you need to have a very stable tool to overcome those challenges as well. So now let's go to the example, and let me show you a way that you can author fast a test with testing, and how you can overcome a dynamic UI. So first of all, I want to go back to this is Salesforce. This is my sandbox, and you can see this object, the account object, which is the out-of-the-box object. But as Pablo mentioned, we added a customizable, which is not out-of-the-box checkbox, which is called is GDPR safe, which is new in the layout. And then what we want to do is basically simply author a test that allows you to create an account. And I want to show you how testing identifies what is the method for testing to identify objects and elements in a very smart way with its AI algorithm in order to recognize changes in elements and customized elements. So first of all, I want to show you the ability to overcome the first or the side note challenges that we talked about, which is the login. So testing for Salesforce has a special out-of-the-box step that is called the login step, login sandbox. Let's call it login sandbox. And with this step, let's call it orally, which to be unique. And with these steps, basically, all the login functionality is covered by testing, overcoming all the challenges, and just locks you straight in. As a best practice, I'm always parameterizing my test data so I can be very generic and can diverse the environments that I'm testing. So here, I decided to have three main parameters that are relevant to this test, which is the URL, the environment that I want to log in, and the credential of the user that I want to be logged into to Salesforce. And then simply what I'm doing is configuring those parameters for the smooth login, username and password. On the way, I want to show you that we also have a method here that can handle the multi-factor authentication. So if you have a multi-factor authentication in your environment, testing is handling it by having a service that is mobile, is like a software authenticator that can handle all the login via a multi-factor authentication, but in this case, it's redundant. So let's give it the test a name, create account. And let's see, first and foremost, how testing logs in smoothly to your environment, taking control of the application under test. And you can see that simply, as you can see, testing is now handling all the login, inputting the username that I entered, the password, handling all the logic behind the scene, and logs me in safely to the environment. And this is the gate. Here is where I want to start really to offer my business logic and create the account. So from this point on, I'm just going to record the test. I'm going to go to the Sales Console, and then I'm just going to create new account. And I'm going to call it orally, just to be short. And I'm going to use this this field because I want to show you how we locate such fields. And I'm going to click Save. At this point in the logic, I want also to validate that really the account that was created as I expected, and I'm going to add another out-of-the-box text validation that testing provides. And I'm going to validate that really the account is Orly, and that's it. This is the test. And I'm going to save the test. And I want to look together at this checkbox, the is GDPR ready, and look at the method that testing identifies elements. So when we're talking about being resilient to changes or being having a stable environment that can identify my elements in a very dynamic platform like Salesforce, we're talking about the method that really has a logic that is artificial intelligence that looks at the entire DOM, at the entire structure of the DOM, and builds a unique path from the root, from the body, to the target element, using a unique identifiers that we're calling the selector. So each of the parents of the tree has various selectors. Selectors are the unique identifiers of the parents along the root till we're getting to the target element. And also the AI algorithm provide a weight or a scale to each of the selector. So how important is the selector for this element in order to identify the element along the way? So we're not leaning only on XPath or CSS selectors or one dimension selector. We're creating a multi-dimension selector that will identify the element even though things will change in the layout, and I will show you the changes later on. So just for this sake of a demo, let's run the test. And what I want to show you is, first of all, you can see that each step that is happening, you can see clearly where the test is at the moment. And you can see live, of course, all the steps. And you can understand where you are located in the test. But more importantly, I would like to show you what is the outcome of identifying the elements. And basically, the testing provides a score of confidence to the element that was identified. So now that the test ran, I want to show you again that we got a grade of 82%. It means that something in the DOM, even now, we authored the test and the test ran, something in the platform changed. Some elements or selectors were dynamic, and the score of the parents and some of the ancestors changed, but still, we're 82% confidence that the element is the right element and the test passed. But this is really a basic demo of the basic concept of testing and how you can author fast with a recorder elements and how flows and how you can identify, how are we identifying the elements. But now I want to show you an example of how we are dealing with changes. So let's take the is GDPR safe example, and as Pablo showed you, let's say that the customer or the company or you decided that you want to change the label because the concept now has changed and you want to call it is audit ready for all the reasons that Pablo mentioned in the first part of the demo, and let's save the change. And I want to show you that the layout did change. Now the label is different, and basically the is GDPR ready is no longer in the layout. And let's see how testing basically deals with this logic. So again, as I mentioned, the method for us to identify elements is not via a simple index or a label or any kind of one-dimension selector, Basically, we're really identifying all the unique elements, and then we can be resilient to any change. And change, this is a simple change, by the way. We changed the label, but you can imagine that the test passed. You can imagine that changes can occur in location of elements. Again, you can see that the score even didn't drop. Test team identified with a high level of confidence. The element, although you can see again that some elements are really dropping in score, their overall score is still very high. So to have a strategy that really checks your business flow and is not sensitive to changes that are not affecting the business flow, this is something that is very important, because what we did here is just changing the label, but we didn't change anything in the business flow. We didn't change anything in the logic, and then this test really passed, indicating that everything is okay. Another thing that I want to mention, that a lot of changes can happen over time. So basically the UI slowly can drift from a certain view to another view, and from one view to another view. And the delta between the initial view to the current view can be very substantial. And for that, we have an algorithm, an advanced algorithm that we're calling auto improve. So what testing is doing is identifying any element that dropped the score below 70%. So here we don't have this case because the change was not very big. But if we identify that any element, target element, drop score below 70%, we're recreating a new locator with a technology that looks at past successful runs, and then we're boosting again the score. So we're making your test and your element locator very stable. We will not allow, for example, for an element to degrade in score, so because changes in the UI drifted. So it's very important to have a resilient method to locate your elements. So saying that, I want to continue to the next question. So now that we have identified that there are some changes, but the changes really didn't break the test, what happens, or how can I monitor changes that did break or are breaking my business flow? And what does it mean? So when Pablo showed the change in the metadata, you can see that the metadata change affected a lot of objects in Salesforce, from the email to the account and other places. But how can I understand if this change really had a negative impact or an impact or an unexpected impact on my business process or even on my user experience? So this is where you need to have a method, or as part of your testing strategy, you need to have the test that can catch or fail the scenario that has this unexpected behavior. And I want to show you an example. So here we did a really small change. We just changed the label. It's not really substantial, and it's good that really the test passed and didn't break. But what happened if I'm adding an additional complex rule that makes things more complicated and is changing my business flow? For example, I wrote here a validation rule that couples the GDPR save with the description field, and it's very simple, and it says if the GDPR check is checked and the description is blank, we are throwing an error and you cannot really create the account. So what does it mean? It means that in my business flow, if I have the GDPR safe checked, I expect to have a description, for example, that says This customer we had an audit and on this and this date, and it's GDPR safe, and the data privacy was completed, etc., etc., etc. And if not, we will not allow to create the account. So what I'm going to do now is really activate this rule. This rule was not activated, and now let's see how it really affects the test. So what I would expect to happen in this case is basically the test to fail and not to pass, because the business flow has now changed, and I really want to catch the indication that something in the logic changed and I need to correct it. And the correction is either I'm changing the flow or adjusting my test, or I'm also in new test that is adjusting. As you can see, the test now will fail because we will not have the account created. So either I'm repairing my test or creating a new test that handles this new use case, but really it's a discovery that something in my business flow didn't work as expected. And this is a good example of a failure of a test that really catches a substantial change in your business flow. So imagine you are doing, as you can see, the test failed. And the test failed as expected, it is good. So we have two cases. We have the cases that we don't want the business process to break because the change is not substantial. But we have the cases that we do want the business process or the flow to break because we want to catch the change or the substantial change in the user experience and adjust our cases accordingly. So here is basically the importance of how we can show the importance of the coverage of business flows and how changing the metadata or adding more rules or business rules into the platform can affect the business flow. And before we're putting it in production, we need a way to understand how should we handle it, or what the user would expect, or what is the damage for our company if we don't catch it in advance and handle it. So saying that, I really want to go to the next question, which is how can I combine Salesforce backend logic with my tests? So what does it mean? What do we want to achieve here? So it's not that trivial, or it's not that expected that a flow will start in Salesforce and end in Salesforce. Many customers that we handle or that are using our platform, and in general, many Salesforce customers really doesn't start their flow from Salesforce. They have their own website, their own business application that simply triggers a logic in Salesforce. And the entire user experience is not the Salesforce platform, but is the logic, the application, the business application that the customer has in-house. So in that case, you need to have the ability inside your testing tool to start the flow from an external application or your business application and invoke logic in Salesforce. Either invoke it via going from interface to interface, or from going to the backend of Salesforce via code. And I'm going to explain what does it mean. A lot of time you're writing logics or generating flows in the flow builder, or writing triggers or Apex code inside Salesforce. And those triggers can happen once in a while. You need to wait for an event to trigger those triggers and the logic in order for it to be activated and for you to be able to test it. And what is the effect of it on your business flow. So you need to have a tool that can trigger instantly this logic, that can activate a trigger, that can ad hoc or as part of your business flow immediately call these functions without waiting for the trigger to happen because of any condition that is in the system. And sometimes you just want to focus on a specific area of Salesforce and test this specific area of the UI, but you need to have objects created as a preparation to this UI testing. For example, we now created via UI an account, but maybe I want to create really to test an opportunity, and I don't want to go end to end for the flow of recording the creation of an account and then the creation of opportunity. I just want to create an opportunity, an account, and attach it to an opportunity. So I want to have a way to write a code or create instantly an account with code and actually test the UI of the opportunity. And for that, we need the ability to combine backend logic and front-end logic. And I want to show you an example in testing. So here I created a folder. You can see you have a folder structure. And I created a test that is using a special step. And I want to show you this step before I'm going to invoke the test. So as I said before, in testing for Salesforce, we created two special steps. One is the login, which I showed you in the first flow, and the other one is Salesforce Apex Action. So what is Salesforce Apex Action? Let's go into one of the steps. As you can see, you have an editor. It's a Monaco editor that really allows you to write code in a very, very explanatory way. And this code is running in an anonymous way as an anonymous class on your selected Salesforce environment. So as you can see, here we have, as in the login step, we have the Salesforce environment. You can, again, use parameters as I did. And one of the parameters is the security token that enables you to activate the Apex code in an anonymous way. And here what I did, let's go over the logic of the flow. So of course we have the setup step that shows me the parameters that I want to use and the test data and the URL that I want to target. Here I created a group. So behind this nice rectangular, you can see it's a group. Behind this, I wrote a logic of creating an account. So here I created an account. This logic can be used as a shared group. Once you are creating such logic, you can share it and use it in other tests. So basically you can have building blocks of logic that are usable. So inside this group, I have a create account. And then after I created the account, here I wanted to show you basically that you can also create an account with code. But I decided to skip this and just create an account via the new UI and then do two updates. One is updating the account description. So I'm creating an account. I'm selecting the description to be already description inserted by Apex step. And then of course I'm updating, I'm doing an update command. And the other update that I'm doing is updating the field is GDPR safe to be selected. The last thing that I'm doing is delete. So here, what happens a lot of times in Salesforce testing and in any type of testing that you're creating a lot of objects, basically you're exploding your environment. And here, what I'm doing is using an Apex code to just to clean up the objects that I created, and then I'm just using it instantly just to test and cleaning it up. So this is the way that you can combine UI flow with a backend flow. Of course, you can do a lot of validations, and let's run the test just to see that it runs and it works properly, and really the Apex code is running. So basically what we are doing right now is, again, cleaning up the browser. Testing is really logging in safely into the environment, running the code. So what you are seeing that the code is running inside the group. If I'm going to go into the group, you will see the steps running. And the account is going to be created, and then you can see that this is the name of the account, and then you're going to see that the details are going to be updated. And again, you can see that the is audit ready is checked, and the description is the description that is in the epic step. And the test passed successfully. So you can imagine that you can use a lot of permutations of UI testing with backend testing. You can make a test that is only a backend testing just to trigger, for example, triggers that you have, change objects and see what is the effect of it, and get a really end-to-end feedback of the entire process. So this is one of the things that are really important. Another thing that is very important in a way to test or to understand what is happening in your test is the ability to have insights into your project. So for example, here we have a dashboard that shows you what happens in any time resolution. And for example, you can see that in the last 7 days, I had a scheduler or a plan with Salesforce tests that basically failed. And here is why they failed, because it required email validation. So imagine that as, for example, your security restrictions are changing, you might expect the login to fail, and you can dive into your failure and analyze it. So you need a quick way to understand what happened in your environment, what happened in your Salesforce suites, in your regressions, and quickly analyze what is the problem. So you need also the surrounding of test management, the ability to understand what happened, who did what was the last activity, what is the status of your tests, how many duplicate steps do you have, what were your last failed scenarios, etc., etc. So on top of that, you need to have the ability to zoom out of your project and understand the status of the project and on your Salesforce test and suites. And saying that, I think that we can basically wrap and say that there are basically two things that I think that are very important in the sense of this webinar. So I think that we need to look at the concept of impact analysis and what is a productive impact analysis. So impact analysis is to understand what changes were made and where are they impacting my organization, my Salesforce metadata, my Salesforce procedures. But the other side of the coin, which is very important, is how those changes impact my Salesforce flows, business processes, and user experience. And for that, you need a strong and stable strategy for coverage testing, UI coverage testing that allows you to check an end-to-end flow, combining back-end and front-end logic, and allowing you to have a stable environment that can scale and cover as much flows as possible in a very, very short time without a lot of knowledge of how to code and inability to scale fast. And then that Salesforce is very, very complex and dynamic platform. It changes dramatically from release to release. Salesforce has like 3 releases a year. Metadata can change, the platform can change, the DOM and the HTML can change, and it can be very flexible, but very challenging to analyze. So you need strong tools and stable tools that will allow you to analyze the impact of changes that you're doing to your org. And Pablo or Sean, do you want to add anything on top of that?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, it was awesome.
Are there any questions anybody has about this? I mean, so we got to see from Pablo talking about how you would manage all the configuration changes. This is especially critical when you have lots of people contributing to changes in different environments, and there's a lot of confusion, and potential for conflict, and Salto helps resolve a lot of those things. So and also just simplify how you can make those changes. You can see very quickly how the language is a lot easier, the changes are very clear in what's being changed. And then Testum can help with the the testing of those business process flows to make sure that they're being that they actually work as they're intended. And if you are making changes to your application, Testum can recover from some of those changes and continue to see if the flows are working properly. Any questions? Do you want to move to the next slide just so you can see the final thing? So if you did want to sign up for either one of these products, you can go to app.testum.io or app.salto.io, and that'll get you right into the sign-up flow. Or you can just go to the websites of either one of those, testum.io or salto.io, and browse around and see what you want. Of course, you can always request demos or interact with the team if you just go out there. I don't see any other questions. So with that, I think we'll close the webinar, and thank you very much for attending. Hopefully everybody learned something, and we'll be, if any of your colleagues would like to see this, we'll be placing it on our website for replay, so you can point your colleagues to come see this.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Orly. It was great.
Thank you, perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.